Hi, I'm Mario Ariave with Utmost Performance. For today's topic of discussion, we are going to discuss the metric called Rate of Perceived Exertion. There was a video that I did a while back where I discuss what I feel to be the importance of the metric of rate of perceived exertion and the fact that in my training plans that I give to my athletes, there are certain workouts that are assigned strictly with and by the metric of rate of perceived exertion. That's the only information that the athletes get. And I feel that it is very beneficial for them to have to do that. But what I wanted to do for today's video is I wanted to discuss rate of perceived exertion in a little bit more detail and kind of tell you guys what it is so that you can understand how it works. So rate of perceived exertion will start at the very top. Before you perform any kind of a task, be it a workout, be it a race, a competition, something of that nature, we always have an expectation that we bring into that particular task or that particular event. And what I'm talking about is not necessarily maybe a goal or something that you have set out to do, but in terms of what is it going to feel like? What am I ready, what am I going up against? What do I need to prepare myself for? How is this going to feel in terms of from a mental standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a physical standpoint? And we have these thoughts and we have these notions, and that essentially is kind of our pre-event, pre-competition, pre-workout, whatever you want to call it, type of expectation. And then we actually get to work. Then we actually get to the task. So the race begins or the workout begins or whatever it is that you're taking on. And as you're going about doing this particular thing and performing this task, then there's this feedback loop that begins to work. And so for our intents and purposes, you're pedaling, you're riding, and as you're doing that, there's all kinds of information coming in and being processed and being crunched and then being thrown into this feedback loop. Information such as, what is the rate of my breathing? I'm paying attention to my breathing. Am I breathing, shallow and very frequently, or am I under control, still able to kind of take full breaths and talk and those kind of things? What are my legs feeling like? Am I beginning to feel that burn that a lot of athletes characterize as, a sensation during a race or during a workout? We're also overlaying that with kind of external things like how much is left to go. So in the interval, how much time is maybe left in that interval or in that race? How much distance is left in that race? Do I have competitors with me? Do I find myself in a breakaway? Who's in that breakaway? Weather conditions, what are those weather conditions? So there's external things coming in that we're having to process, and we're coupling that with the internal things that are happening, and we're taking stock on all of this, and then we're packaging that up, and then that is literally our experience. That is our reality that we are going through at that particular moment. And so what ends up happening as that feedback loop is making its way, it eventually comes up and it butts up with, okay, before I started this thing, I had an idea and an expectation of what I would need to do and how I would feel in order to achieve my goal, in order to be successful. This is what I felt I was up against. And now that I'm actually doing that thing, then here's the information that's being brought. And both of those things meet in the middle. And then depending on, was my expectation of what I thought I was going to experience, was it accurate with what I'm actually feeling? And then there's a difference there. Or hopefully there's not a difference there. Or maybe there is a difference there and maybe it's a good thing. Let me explain that for you. Let's just say on a scale of 1 to 10, because that's how I do my rate of perceived exertion workouts. 1 being very, very easy, 10 being extremely difficult. Let's say before I started this race, I thought to myself, it's going to take about a 6 out of 10 type of an effort for me to achieve my goal and for me to get what I want. I want to be on the podium, and I think it'll be a 6 out of 10 type of an effort. And then you actually get into the race and the feedback is kicking back an 8. So you brought in a 6, you're experiencing an 8. That's a difference of 2, okay? Versus The expectation that I brought into this particular race and this particular event was I felt like it was going to take a 9 out of 10. It was going to be extremely difficult. It was going to take pretty much a very good effort on my part to be able to achieve that goal. And then same feedback loop is kicking out an 8. Now that's a difference of 1, but it's on the positive side. And what ends up happening is where all the research is going, there's a lot of research and time being put into this metric of rate of perceived exertion. And what they're finding is that your rate of perceived exertion is what is going to determine your level of performance that you can achieve on that particular day. Give it the workout, give it the race, the competition, whatever it is that you're doing. Now, why is that? Because if there is a big difference between what you thought you were going to have to do and what is actually going on, it's very heavy mentally and emotionally. It's very discouraging to the point where the athlete will begin to think to themselves, this just isn't worth it for me to continue to do this. I have been punched in the face and I wasn't ready for that. And so therefore, the athlete begins to become discouraged. They begin to lose motivation. And at that point, effort begins to decrease to the point where now that athlete is not giving their best effort because they don't feel, obviously, they brought in certain demands they thought they were going to have to meet, and the demands are bigger than what they expected. So they feel they're not going to be able to meet those demands. And so therefore, they begin to lose confidence and their effort level begins to come down. Now, notice what I'm not saying in this video. We are not talking about heart rate. We are not talking about power. We are not talking about speed. We're not talking about any of those metrics. We are literally talking about what is the expectation you brought in and what are you actually facing? How do those two come together and what's the difference between those two? Now, in the second example I use, if you thought it was going to be a 9 and you're experiencing an 8, then the opposite is true. Remember I said the difference could be a bad thing or it could be a good thing. Like in example number 2, it's a good thing. You came in with the right mindset and expectation to be able to meet those kinds of demands. So now I want to shift and end the video with this. What can we do about it? And myself as well as a coach working on this with my athletes. Folks, your rate of perceived exertion is trainable. It is trainable. Now, it's kind of difficult to train and it's not something that we can concretely hold in our hand like a power number or like a heart rate or something like that. Rate of perceived exertion is interesting because my 8 out of 10 might not be your 8 out of 10 and vice versa. And so it very much so is individual to the athlete, but by and large, we can train, all of us can train our rate of perceived exertion. Now, what am I talking about when I say we can train it? What are we looking to do? We're simply looking to get better at this initial expectation and aligning it properly with what the demands of that event or that race competition, what those two are going to come up to and do. So the simple math is I want it to be, I bring in a 9 and it actually ends up being an 8. Or at worst case, I want to bring in a 9 and it ends up being a 9. I don't want to bring in a 7 and it ends up being a 9 because there's a difference of 2 that's actually impacting me in a negative way. And so how can we train this rate of perceived exertion so that those two things align better? The first thing, and you'll hear me say it frequently, and I really just bug my athletes to death on this, is becoming more self-aware. Self-awareness is where we will begin to work on this rate of perceived exertion and training it properly. We have to become more self-aware. What is it that we're getting into? Can I understand that? And understanding that means understanding myself. You're the one that's getting ready to do this. So what do you know about yourself? And then what do you know about what it is that you're getting ready to do? What is the workout? What are the intervals? How long are they? How hard are we looking to go on those intervals? What are your numbers? What are your metrics that your coach has assigned for you? Or in the competition, what is that competition? Who is in that race? What are the competitors? What does the course look like? Where's the wind coming from? What's the weather going to be? Where am I coming into that from a fitness standpoint? and getting better at understanding ourselves and this self-awareness that we have, a grand big picture of this self-awareness. So one of the things I'm going to plug is meditation. Meditation is a wonderful practice. No, it doesn't go into training peaks, and no, we can't necessarily measure it, but I'll tell you what, it will make a huge difference in raising and increasing your self-awareness. So therefore, you bring in a better estimate of that initial expectation before you go to do what it is that you want to do. But then the second thing that you can do is get into these experiences where you are becoming uncomfortable, where you are doing hard things. If you're going to experience if your feedback loop is about to kick out a 9 out of 10 for a particular race, then in training, you should be getting into some of those 9 out of 10 type workouts and situations so that you can understand and label those things appropriately. Training your rate of perceived exertion is about training that math to add up better and to be in our favor versus against us. So getting into those difficult situations and understanding them better. And then as you get into them, plugging in and not necessarily tuning it out with music and not necessarily trying to be distracted by watching a movie or a video or something like that if you're on the trainer, but actually like while you're pedaling, just be in silence, be with your breathing, be with your suffering, be with your pain, be with your discomfort. Understand it. Press into it. Yes, like a sadist, masochist type of thing. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. How are you going to figure this out if you don't become familiar with those kinds of sensations? And then the last thing that I'll say, and this one I think is a big one, when we look at successful individuals, we think to ourselves, that person has a tremendous ability to suffer. They're really tough. They express a lot of grit. And yes, that is partially true. I will say that there is something to that. But at the same time that I say that, we also need to understand that those high-level competitors, those successful athletes that we're looking at, what they also have is they've trained this rate of perceived exertion so they're not caught off guard. When it's time to do that workout, when it's time to get into that race, when it's time to get into that competition, they're not caught off guard. There isn't this dissonance between the number that they bring in and then the number that they get from this feedback loop. And so they've trained that ability to be able to do that. And then what we do is, as we train that ability, then we get further and further into the numbers and we can do harder things and we can get more uncomfortable. And that's where I think that misperception of, oh yeah, that person just really, really tough. That person just really has a ton of grit. Well, what they've done is they've stair-stepped the level of discomfort that they've been able to take on. Because remember, what I said is you can't outrun a huge difference. When it comes to endurance sport, you can't outrun the fact that, oh man, I thought this was going to be a 4 and it's actually an 8. That's a huge difference there. You can be as tough as you want. That's going to be really hard to keep going with that. So if you've never been in an 8, if you've never been at an 8, then it's going to be really difficult, number one, for you to assign it an 8. But then when you get to the 8, it's going to be really difficult for you to deal with the 8. And so you've got to come to some of those situations and you've got to embrace them. What does that mean? Well, I'll end with this. It means failure. It means not hitting the mark. It means falling short. That's what that means. When you come across your first 8 and you maybe don't get it done, hey, you know what? That's okay. It was your first time there. When you come across your 8 for the 20th time, now we're in business. Now all of a sudden you knew what that 8 was going to be. You brought an 8 to the table and now you're okay because now your head's not spinning and you're able to do what you need to do. So I hope that this video has been successful. Folks, rate of perceived exertion, it really is the thing. When you're out there and you're competing, for those of you that are racing or you're going for a Strava KOM or you're just trying to break a power record or something along those lines, it really is not about the numbers as much as it is about how does this feel to me? And do I feel with how it feels and what I brought in, do I feel that I can keep going? Do I feel that I can sustain this? And that really is what's going to make you a better competitor, and it's going to make you able to set bigger and higher goals and perform at a higher level. All right, folks, thank you guys so much for tuning in. As I said, real quick, I do have a video that I posted where I talked about rate of perceived exertion as a training metric versus heart rate versus power. So y'all go check that out. And then lastly, if you missed it because you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then go ahead and subscribe. And I'll throw out some more stuff here in a little bit for you guys to check out. But I hope that this has been helpful, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time.